Hello and welcome to part 2 of our classic Christmas cue that we're composing in the middle of a UK heatwave. What fun. So from part 1 I had an interesting comment from Jim who said it didn't sound very Christmassy when we started off. I think the reason I don't start with things like sleigh bells and Glock is because it can take you down a very typical path, but when you've done it a few times you realise those things are going to come in later. But thanks for the comment, Jim. As always, like and subscribe, always appreciated. Let's get on with it. I've had a listen to what we ended up with from part 1. The thing I'm worried about is the brass section, which doesn't sound particularly good at the moment. So I'm going to have a listen through to that and see if I can fix some things to start with. Right, so I think I've fixed the horns to some extent. So they are now in time and sounding good. So we've got this effect now. So you can hear they're all nicely on the beat. Bear in mind, depending on the library you're using, you might not want to quantize because the attack comes slightly before the actual transition hits. So even though the note is starting, the transition is actually going to hit on the bar. So you've got to be a bit careful which libraries you're using. Also, what I've done in all of these, including the violins, is I have changed the mic settings to close. Instead of using the mix, we're now just using close. The reason I've done that is because it separates the sound so we can hear them nice and clearly, for one thing, but I also know because of the template we're using, we're going to have reverbs specifically for the brass sections anyway. So that's something we can do later. At the moment, we're just focusing on trying to get the melody right. I also think the Reed's melody that I put on sounds a bit more like a harmony, and the run of the drums towards the end is a bit too cinematic this early because we're only at 25 seconds. I want to build this out a little bit longer and maybe introduce a bit more of a normal melody before that harmonic melody comes in. In this case, I think I'm going to build this step by step rather than copying this to the end, because it doesn't really sound like an end. It sounds much more like an introduction. So I'm going to have a play with where this might go in the next section. Okay, I just stopped myself for a second because I forgot to explain what was going on with the brass section and how I solved the problem of them sounding a bit out of time. So listening to this section, I did have separate notes on the staccatissimo horns, but what I've done, as you can see, is I've broken it out into single notes for the staccatissimo, and then I've used the articulation multi-tongue, which is designed to do exactly that sound. So there we go. I've done that for the horns and the trumpets. I've changed them from muted to multi-tongue, and the same with the tenor trombones. I've split those out into multi-tongue and staccatissimo as well. So just thought I'd remind you of that. Right, I'm going to carry on with this end bit, or this next bit that I'm trying to finish now. Okay, so we've got a bit of a continuation section going on now. We're moving the bass notes around a bit more frequently. So we're going D, A, F sharp and G. So we've got this sort of sound. What you'll notice is I'm bringing in the reeds that were the sort of harmony melody, and I've swapped it out at the beginning for this cello lead instead. And played around with some short notes in the violins 1 and 2. What else have we added? I've changed the harp to sustain notes instead of doing their tremolo. So we've got this going on. And that is complementing the violins 1 and 2 as well. And the horns, I think, are going to take on the melody. So I think I'm going to put those in next. Right, there we go. We've got the horns taking on that melody line now while the violins drop out a little bit. They did sound quite empty without the legatos on top of the short notes as well, so I've put those back in. And we've also got this ending hit note as well, so the last bar. That's going to be a nice lead into our middle section breakdown, which might start with these drums. But we'll see how it goes, and then we'll do another build up to the end and out. So what's going to come in this sort of middly section? We're not going to go too low. We don't want to drop all the energy completely, but who knows? Okay, I have had a change of plan. Let's get rid of this editor. I think this is now pretty good as a full-on ending. And we've got, what, 23 tracks or something here? So what I'm going to do, instead of adding extra to it, what I'm going to do is move this along, and we're going to go back to what is going to become our intro and just think about which of these instruments we want to bring in first. So as Jim said, maybe we start with the sleigh bells, just so it sounds definitely Christmassy. We'll have a play around. That would get us to 1 minute, nearly 1 minute 30. So we probably need a bit of a bigger build. All I'm going to do is pick and select some of these different tracks to bring them in one at a time. So I think that's a good way forward to get ourselves a finished cue. So see you when I've grabbed some of those and moved them around. Okay, I'm just pausing here to show you my thinking. What I've done is moved everything along and copied out the sleigh bells. So I want an even number of bars ideally. So I've got 6 in here. That takes us out to 1 minute 30, just over. If I was going to want a longer piece, I'd add them in sections of 2, and we could increase this to 2 minutes. But just as a rough guide, I've also started 1 bar in so that we've got that room to have a build in if we want one. Okay, so a couple of updates. I've moved some of the tracks around and I've color coded all the brass into yellow, so I know exactly where they are, because things were starting to get a little bit busy. I've put all the tuned percussion, drums and untuned percussions at the bottom so I can keep an eye on those. As you can see, what I'm doing is now building out from the start. As you can see, I've added in Albion 1 long strings now because it was just an easy solution to get a nice introduction full lush pad. So the start sounds like this now. So very crispy. And we get straight into a cello doing our main melody. Join in with some bass. Ready to meet on the D. So you can see how this is building up. There needs to be some more movement in there at the moment. So let's have a go at adding some of that. Okay, so I've added in some damage percussion using the high loops to add a bit of extra movement that we were sort of missing. You'll notice I've extended some of the horn lines to come in a bit early, and the tenor trombone as well. I've also been playing around with the vibrant reeds and doing different melodies over the top. So we've got now, my intention is to have these lower in volume, but I'm not worried about the mixing and the levels at the moment. What I'm trying to do is get a feel for the sound overall that I want. So we've got a bigger build here until we get to what was that was effectively bar 1 where we started in part 1, and all this extra stuff has been fleshed out before it. What I'm going to do is go through and do the automation now, because I have left that until the end. So anything like the violins, the trumpets, anything that has an emotional play to it, I'm going to go through and automate now. Back in a sec. Okay, that's going to do us for part 2. We've got a structure out to 1 minute 30. We're introducing the different elements as we go along. I'm going to play the whole thing for you as a bit of an outro, but bear in mind we've got no reverb on this at the moment, so it's going to sound quite dry. But to give you an idea of where we're going and what we're going to do in part 3, this should be a pretty good guide. Like and subscribe, always appreciated. See you in the next one. Bye for now.